Hi everybody, welcome to our first installment of our weekly Pac-12 Preview. I'm Roxy Bernstein, joined by the UCLA Hall of Famer JJ Stokes. And JJ, a lot of storylines coming up for the 2011 college football season and the Pac-12. What are you looking at in particular? What are the biggest stories that you're going to be following?
I think the biggest story to follow is Andrew Luck, a guy that could have came out last year and would have been the first pick of the draft for the Carolina Panthers. He decided to stay. Obviously, that's the biggest story. Front runner for the Heisman, a guy that can take down teams with his arm and also with his leg. He does a great job of running. When you see the clips, he's running around, people bouncing off of him. So he's an exciting player, but the best player in college football.
The Heisman Trophy race, you alluded to Andrew Luck as being maybe the favorite. There's some other great candidates just in the Pac-12 conference alone. You look at Michael James, of course, at Oregon, and his quarterback, Darren Thomas. You could throw USC's Matt Barkley into the mix, maybe Nick Foles at Arizona, even a defensive player like Vontaze Burfict at Arizona State. This conference is loaded not only with, okay, just Andrew Luck being the favorite, but there's a number of guys in this league that are Heisman Trophy worthy.
I definitely think that there are a lot of guys that are Heisman worthy. You have Michael James, who really came in third last year in Heisman voting. He's a guy that I like him because he's not flashy, but he's effective. He can run off tackle. He can run in between the tackles. A guy that scored 17 touchdowns last year and had 1,700 yards from line of scrimmage. So he's an effective runner. Also on the same team, you have Darren Thomas, a guy at quarterback that is the decision maker for that team, a guy that threw 30 touchdown passes. You have two guys there that will be vying for that Heisman race. It may take away from one another, but they'll still be in the hunt.
Vontaze Burfict at Arizona State. Here's a defensive player that he's a special guy. He controls the game defensively for Dennis Erickson and company.
You know, I think the team defensively and as a whole take on his mentality. He's a mean guy. He's ready to punish. He's ready to inflict pain on offenders. And I think his team takes that on, and I think that's why they're successful.
Well, the game of the week that everybody's talking about across the college football landscape takes place at a neutral site, Arlington, Texas this weekend. Oregon, LSU, two top 5 teams going at it. Pac-12 against the SEC. What are you looking for as the big keys for an Oregon Duck victory in the land of Big D?
I think that the biggest key when it comes to the Oregon Ducks is defensively, that front 7, can they control the offensive line for LSU? They have 4 returning starters, and I think they're going to look to run with Jarrett Lee as their new starting quarterback. I think that's one of the key focuses for the Oregon Ducks, really to get on LSU defensively in the front 7 and force them into a passing situation.
The big thing with Oregon is tempo and speed. LSU hasn't seen this before. How tough do you think it'll be, JJ, for LSU to handle what Oregon's going to throw at them?
You know, that's one of my other keys that I say to the game, and I call it the Prefontaine factor. And for those who don't know, Prefontaine was a distance runner that could run all day and fast as lightning, and I think they bottled that up and gave that to the Ducks because this offensive football team is just that. They run like crazy. They have crazy endurance, and they're effective and they're efficient, and it causes most defenses to be on their heels, and as a defense you can't have that.
Let me ask this about Oregon. They lost in the BCS championship game to an SEC team. They reminded themselves all offseason that, hey, we lost to a team from the SEC. We have a shot right out of the chute at another SEC team. It was Auburn in the title game. It's LSU here. You think that's going to fuel them a little bit, some motivation to beat the SEC?
I think definitely it will fuel this team. You have a lot of guys that are carryover from last year, but you have some new hungry guys that didn't get quite the playing time that they would have liked. So I think that in itself is going to create a little hunger for some of this team to really get back there and win it all. Not just, they don't want to just show up and be there and be a part of all the hoopla that goes on with the championship. They want to go there and win it, and I think that's their mindset. And if you listen to Chip Kelly, he says the same thing. We forgot about last year, and the guys are just as hungry this year.
Big thing for Oregon is they have a number of guys to replace. Only a handful of starters on each side of the ball return, but a lot of players got experience for Oregon last year, so that might be an overrated stat as far as people looking, well, Oregon's got to replace this or they got to replace that guy. But Oregon, even though they're replacing all these starters, they're still a pretty veteran team.
I think that's one of the misconceptions that they do have about Oregon. The fact is they were blowing teams out last year, and they had opportunities to put second and third string guys in to get that that experience. So when it is their turn as a starter, they perform up to the levels of the starters.
Well, that's our Pac-12 preview, the big game of the day. Of course, you can catch it on ABC, 5 o'clock Pacific time, 6 o'clock for our friends in the Mountain Time Zone. Oregon LSU from Dallas, as it's a big week, certainly for the Pac-12 Conference. Thanks for tuning in this week. We'll see you next week. We'll review the Oregon LSU game and get you pumped up for week 2 in the Pac-12. For JJ Stokes, Roxy Bernstein, right here for your Pac-12 preview.